to afford to finance the economy. It is felt that we must come out of that melee. And there are those who are pushing the idea that the natural resources of the Bahamas ought to be the engine that runs the Bahamas. And that's the only alternative, because as many of us are not aware here, the Bahamas is worth annually over $32 trillion. But from the natural resource base, I don't want to get into a transition tonight. Of course, you'll hear beyond that, but there needs to be systemic structural change in the economy of the Bahamas, and that is what is happening.
I just wanted to respond to one of our first comments. Erin, I think she left. I appreciate her optimism about this kind of passive-aggressive, we go to work and we don't do no work, and that's our way of sticking it to the man. I just have to wholeheartedly disagree with that. I think that what that attitude is a systematic deterioration of the will and drive that we're supposed to have for our life, and it smothers the invincibility that you're supposed to have as a young person, right? So to take that invincibility and channel it into sneaking on Facebook all day, I'm sorry, that's not my idea of any worthwhile movement. So I think that there is an inkling of wanting something more for yourself and feeling like you deserve something more, but I feel like the way we're going about it, the way that Erin described, is not as useful as her and her optimism might have made it seem.
Ladies and gentlemen, I guess I'm one of the few people in the room that was... Oh, sorry. Hello? Yeah. I was saying that I guess I'm one of the few people in the room that was alive and kicking in 1942. I was 12 years old in 1942 and the son of Percy Christie. And Percy Christie was one of the leaders of the labor organization in the Bahamas at the time. And he was negotiating for the laborers at that time and before the riot, trying to get that wage increase. But the riot itself started as a peaceful labor demonstration. But when they found that there was a Coke truck with bottles of Coca-Cola on Bay Street, and then somehow or other one or two, they just started putting the Coke bottles in the windows to break them. But I can tell you that the only shop on Bay Street whose windows were not broken were those of my father.
That's right.
He had a shoe store on Bay Street, and his group stood in front of his windows and protected his windows, and his store was intact because he was leading the labor unions at that time. And he was a member of the House of Assembly, as we called it in those days, representing the Western District, which went from Baintown to the western end of New Providence. And he represented that area for 14 years and was extremely well respected and receptive over the hill. And I can tell you that I was 12 years old, and my father, there was martial law for 3 days after the riot, and they had the military at the top of over the hill, and the people, and we had a curfew. You couldn't go out of your house after 7 o'clock at night, and some of those that were actually shot were breaking that curfew. Two. Okay, they were breaking the curfew and tried to get by the soldiers, and they got shot. But forgotten what I was going to say. Getting on to the modern history, as you say, this riot was purely for wages. It was non-political, and at that time we didn't have parties or anything, and the PLP did not come out of it. That's my view. But where do we go from here? I was interested that everybody says that we need to change and change our structure, but nobody says how.
I can tell you how.
Okay, so we'll take you.
Good afternoon. My question is for the entire panel, but specifically for you, Ms. Ellis. Dr. Curry came and highlighted the role of the Garvey movement and the international forces that helped to play a role in what was happening locally. And you questioned whether or not Burma Road can happen again. And I was wondering, how do you see the movements that are occurring now in the United States, like the Black Lives Matter movement and the national call for reparations within the Caribbean community? Do you see those two forces as playing a role in the psyche of the Bahamian today to encourage or maybe discourage or connect us or not connect us to uprising again?
I hope so, is the short answer. My longer answer is, I thank you, Dr. Curry, for showing that even, almost 1,000 years ago now, right? 1930s, that even then we could not separate ourselves from what was going on in the world, right? We like to think of today being the time of interconnectedness and all this, but we have always been steeped in the time, the global time in which we live. And that's actually inspiring to me, because even with the internet and with all these global movements, I still feel like we find a way to isolate ourselves. That's kind of what I was talking about before. The way we like to separate ourselves from other movements, other uprisings and things that happen globally. So, Dr. Campbell, I would hope so. But then I feel like there are always reasons and times and opportunities to change what you see is not right. And there are always things to try to fight against. So I would like to hope and think and to do whatever I can and to play my role in being a part of these movements and perhaps changing the consciousness in the Bahamas, if indeed there needs to be a change. I could be completely off the mark, right? There may be a stirring, people may be moving, or perhaps that's not even the move we need to make, right? Perhaps we're on a completely different path. But the point is, I hope so. I hope that we can join together and see ourselves as a part of the time, the epoch in which we live, and not be afraid to play our role and take our position within these movements, within these times, and not just, sit on the side, sit small, and, continue to hope we get a job at Bahamas.
All right, good evening. I'll try and keep this short. I sort of wanted to touch on what Keisha mentioned, sort of your response to Aaron's comments. I think one of the challenges that we have as a country, and you brought it up, this idea that we're supposed to be happy, friendly people, and we have been trained in so many ways that there are things that we do and there's things that we don't do. In addition to the fact that we have this disastrous educational system that has persisted for, I can at least say, for the last 20 years, 94, 21 now, when the BGCSEs came into effect, we've had less than 50% of our high school graduates, because they don't really graduate, from the public schools actually graduate. They leave school with these leaving certificates. So when you talk about addressing these real issues, and when you talk about protesting or calling into account, yes, people who are frustrated can go, and if you're not making money, you can go to the street and march and protest. But what we really need to do in order for us to address some of these real issues, we need to have a Bahamian population who has the ability to ask questions and respond. And what we have right now is we have a Bahamian population who work really well in hotels, sort of really well in hotels. Because our service really isn't that great if we're going to talk about service. But I guess what I'm saying is that we need to look at education. The Bahamian government has and does provide equal education to all Bahamians. You can go to school. Quality of education, though, is a fundamental issue that we have and a fundamental concern in the country. And until education and the quality of education is across the board that allows Bahamians to develop the skills to tackle these social, economic, and environmental issues, to question and to hold the MPs and the people in power accountable for their actions, nothing's going to change. And so what I really believe is needed is that we need to put education first. And as far as I can remember, I'm 28, education has not been a priority for our country. And you can see that because it works. It works. You don't have to read and write, right, to open a door in a hotel or to serve me a drink or to work at a bar or make a bed. It's not necessary. And so this cycle persists. And so Bahamians know you can leave school, get a job at one of the many hotels, and make a decent enough living. Get your rent, get your mortgage to get your Honda and your apartments, and when I graduated high school, that was the Bahamian dream. And I talked to some students at COB today, and they said that's still the Bahamian dream. So I think what I'm saying is that there's a fundamental need, and it's an urgent need for us to put education first and to put quality education first. And that means really giving our Bahamians a chance to have a fair fighting chance in this country. Because right now, they don't really have that.
I'd like to respond to that. One, I'm an educator. Two, I work at Program Shore. Program Shore is a government-run program for those boys who the school system would really like to throw out, but they can't throw them out. So they have to have something for them to do. Apart from skills, what ends up happening, I'll give a little anecdote. I was sitting down with two teachers. One has been in teaching for over 30 years. We've all worked at Program Shore. Another one has been in teaching for about 10 years or so. And we were discussing the purpose of education. And they thought our roles as teachers was to get the students to conform. I couldn't believe that. At first, the older one said, and I was like, what? What? And so I asked the younger one, do you agree with that? And he very articulate, because I can challenge it now. But I say, what? He articulated how, yes, we must get them to conform. And I said, I don't see that as my role. My job is to get them to think.
Amen.
so that they can know they need to conform and when they need to protest. I'm not training anybody to conform to anything, and I think that's what happens, sisters. A lot of the brothers that I teach, I think are good candidates for ministers of finance, good candidates for prime ministers, but what happens is that the education system, our community, our society is bigger than education. All of us must take must take responsibility for this. In order to fix it, really, it's not somebody else that we can blame. Because we blame the preachers, we blame the teachers, we blame everybody, but saying this is our problem. What happens is that we have a society on the whole that really, by the time as these boys get 10 or 12, they've been so robbed of who they are and the value of who they are. They're told to sit small and just take in. And after you have a whole education system that tells you sit small and take in, and then those who sit smallest and take in the most are the ones who are put to the front when the prime minister comes. Those are the ones who are highlighted. Mind you, these guys that I teach, some of them might have gone from an F to a D, but they put way more effort to go from that F to that D than that person who have the A put it. But nobody recognizes it and tell them. This is why I work the program short, because I can't say nobody. One body. I don't know about other people, because I'm sure I'm not alone. I see other educators in here. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. We need to start to begin to not just focus on skills. I know in the history of the Bahamas, we had more skills when our people had more skills when they came out of school at 14 than now. We had more carpenters, we had more tailors, we had more skilled persons than what we have now when we compare it. So the focusing on this magic bullet for education, I don't think is it. I've been there for 10 years, and I know the work that you do too with young people, and I think those are the things. When we as citizens say, I'm not going to blame the government and the system anymore, I'm going to see how my little bit could help change things. Because that's what it's going to take. My little bit could help change things. If some students can't read, and I go and pass them every day, but let me make some time to see how I could help them learn how to read. You might not teach them how to read, but just by reading to them, just by articulating in standard English to them, you allow them to have some sort of skill. So I think that what we're still looking for that magic bullet. But the magic bullet is every single one of us doing every single thing that we see needs to happen.
Yeah.